She accidentally recorded a confession, and when the CEO heard, he said, "Do you mean it?" Everything unraveled because of one small mistake. A voice note she recorded late at night, meant for no one but herself, ended up in the wrong hands. The wrong hands, or maybe the only ones who needed to hear it. Now, standing in the middle of a boardroom with whispers circling her and eyes watching every breath she took, he walked in. And when their eyes met, everything she thought was untouchable, unspoken, impossible, suddenly felt one step away from becoming real. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. Miss Reyes, is there something you want to explain about this voice recording? The conference room went still. Not quiet, still, the way air holds its breath before a storm breaks. 8 department heads turned toward her. A few pretended not to listen, their eyes glued to their screens. But every ear in that room was locked on Camille. Her heart stopped. She blinked twice, not sure she'd heard right, but she had. Her boss, Mr. Granger, mild, balding, tight with his vowels, had just played the first few seconds of her voice over the speaker. Not just her voice, that recording, the one she never meant for anyone to hear. A clumsy 2 a.m. whisper into her phone, her late-night confession, part heartbreak, part diary entry, sent by accident when her hand slipped on the screen. Julian Frost's name had been at the top of the recipient list. He was her CEO. And now? Now it had been played. Out loud. She gripped the sleeves of her soft lavender sweater, hands shaking beneath the table. Her silver bracelet, her mother's, slid slightly down her wrist. That always happened when she was nervous. "No," she said softly, then louder. "No, that was personal. It wasn't meant to be sent. I must have." The chair beside her shifted. Someone cleared their throat. And then, like the cruelest punchline to a bad dream, he walked in. Julian Frost. Charcoal coat draped over one arm. No tie today. His shirt unbuttoned at the collar, just enough to make him seem effortless, like the weight of $1 million company never touched his skin. And his eyes, steel blue, intense, focused, straight, on her. He didn't ask anyone to explain. He didn't look at Granger. He looked at Camille and said one thing. "Do you mean it?" 12 hours earlier, Camille Reyes sat alone at a cafe 3 blocks from the Frost and Caldwell building, stirring sugar into her coffee like she was trying to dissolve her thoughts. "I'm not in love," she muttered into the cup. "I'm just tired." The barista passed her with a polite smile. The cafe was nearly empty, save for an elderly couple arguing about crossword clues and a teenager glued to his phone. The world didn't care about her heartbreak, which made it easier to say it out loud. She reached for her phone and pressed record. "I know I shouldn't. I know he's my boss, but I don't see him the way everyone else does. I've seen him when no one was watching, the way he helps the interns without taking credit, the way he defends people who don't even know he's listening. And last night, when he stayed behind to help me with those contracts, I wanted to thank him, but the words got stuck, like always." Her voice cracked slightly. I love him, but I would never tell anyone. Not ever. This is just for me." She hit stop, but when she stood to leave, the screen blinked. The note had been accidentally added to a reply chain. To Julian Frost. And it had sent. Back in the boardroom, her mind caught up to the present. She stood, palms open, trying not to let the tremor in her voice betray her more than it already had. "Mr. Frost, please. It was a mistake. I was just talking to myself. It wasn't professional, and I'm sorry. But," Julian raised a hand. Granger looked confused. "We can, revisit this later. HR may—" "No," Julian said firmly, but not unkindly. "Stay seated." He walked slowly to the head of the table, every movement calm, deliberate. His eyes didn't leave hers. "I'd like a word with Miss Reyes, alone." 5 minutes later, They were in his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern lines, and an air of polished silence that always made Camille feel like she didn't belong. He handed her a cup of tea. That alone was enough to disarm her. She hadn't expected tea or kindness. "You don't have to say anything," Julian said gently, leaning against the edge of his desk. "I just wanted to know if it was true." Camille stared into her cup. Chamomile. How did he know? Her hand moved unconsciously to the silver bracelet on her wrist, thumb brushing the edge of it, the same way her mother used to when she was lost for words. "I didn't mean to send it," she said finally. "I know it was unprofessional. I didn't think anyone would hear." He nodded but didn't press. Silence stretched. "You said something," he murmured, "about seeing me when no one else does." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "That part," he said, stepping slightly closer, "meant more than you know." There was something in his tone, not teasing, not arrogant, just honest. Camille looked up. Their eyes met. Then, just as the air between them shifted, a knock at the door snapped them apart. "Sir," came Granger's voice through the wood, "HR's requesting a statement regarding the recording." Camille felt her stomach drop. Julian's jaw tensed. He didn't look away from her. "Wait here," he said quietly. "Don't move. I'll handle it." He slipped his coat on, adjusted the cuff of his shirt, and walked out. Alone now, Camille sat down on the edge of the leather guest chair, tea untouched in her hands. A tiny splash had spilled onto the coaster. She reached for a tissue and knocked something off the corner of the desk. It hit the carpet with a soft thud. She bent down and picked it up. A silver photo frame, small, elegant. Inside it, a black and white picture of a young boy holding his mother's hand, and around her wrist, a silver bracelet. Identical to hers. She blinked. No, not identical, the same. She looked down at her own wrist. What were the odds? She clutched the frame, heart hammering, but before she could piece it together, the door flew open. Julian stood there, breath tight, face unreadable. "Camille," he said, closing the door behind him, "I need to tell you something about that bracelet." Julian shut the door with more care than usual, but even that soft click felt like a final note to some unspoken song. He turned back to Camille, eyes not sharp this time, softer, like something old had just stirred in him. He stepped closer and nodded toward the photo frame still in her hand. "You noticed it?" Camille nodded slowly, still clutching the small silver frame. "It's the same bracelet, isn't it?" She looked down at her own, delicate, almost weightless, with the tiny engraving inside the clasp. Her mother used to say it was a one-of-a-kind piece made by a friend when Camille was born. Julian took the frame from her gently, his thumb brushing hers. An accidental touch, but it lingered just half a second too long. His voice, when he spoke again, carried something quieter than usual, not businesslike, almost personal. "My mother wore that bracelet every day," he said, "until she passed." "I never saw her take it off." Camille blinked, her breath caught before she could speak. "I'm sorry," she said instantly. Julian shook his head once. "Don't be. It was a long time ago. But seeing it now, on you, I have to ask, where did you get it?" Camille hesitated. "It was my mother's, too. She gave it to me when I got my first job. Said it would remind me of who I was, no matter where I ended up." Julian moved to his desk and pulled out a drawer. He took out a tiny velvet pouch, aged and folded at the corners, and opened it. Inside, Camille saw something that made her feel the ground sway beneath her, a matching bracelet. Same silver twist, same delicate engraving, same weightless beauty. She looked down at hers again, and then to his. "There were two," Julian said quietly. "She used to tell me they were part of a pair, one for her, one for—" He trailed off. Camille whispered it. "A daughter?" Julian looked up. Something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, confusion, hope. I never knew if it was true. She said once that she'd had a baby before me, a girl, but it wasn't something we talked about. My father didn't allow it. He said she imagined things, that there was no record, no proof, but she believed it. The silence wrapped around them again. Not heavy this time, but full, like the air itself didn't want to move until they both understood what this meant. Camille reached up, thumb tracing the engraving on her bracelet. Her mother used to say, "It came with love, and it stays with you, even when I'm not here." Julian cleared his throat. "Look, I know this might sound insane, but maybe we should talk to someone. Look at records, birth dates, hospitals, just to know." She nodded, eyes still wide. "I always wondered why I felt like I didn't fit," she whispered. "Why my mom used to cry on birthdays." Julian gave a small, barely there smile. "Mine too." And then, just like that, the moment shifted. Something that felt too big, too unreal for the middle of a workday started to settle between them like a puzzle piece clicking into place. An hour later, Camille sat across from Julian in the private executive lounge. The tension from the conference room was long gone, replaced now by something strange, comfort. He brought her coffee, a real one, not from the machine, caramel and cinnamon, just like she always ordered. From the cafe down the street, she hadn't told him that. "You watch the interns' coffee orders too?" she teased gently, trying to soften the edges of the last hour. Julian smirked, only the ones who accidentally confessed to loving their boss. She choked on her sip, laughing despite herself. Too soon? Way too soon. But she smiled anyway, and for the first time that day, the ache in her chest loosened. "Don't worry," he added, voice lower now. "I'm not here to make this harder for you. I'm not teasing. I just don't want you to feel ashamed for feeling something." Camille blinked. "I thought I'd lose my job." "You're not." He said it with that quiet authority again, like gravity bowed slightly around him. "But HR, I already spoke to them. I told them it was private and irrelevant to your performance." "And the board?" Julian leaned forward, elbows on the table. "They don't need to know something that doesn't affect company operations, and if they ever do, they'll hear it from me." His gaze locked with hers, and I'll be honest, Camille's voice was barely above a whisper. "About what?" He tilted his head slightly, the way he always did when he was about to say something dangerous. "That I don't take confessions lightly, especially when they're real." Across town, in a quiet corner office, someone else was listening. Victoria Lane, head of public relations and daughter of one of the founding partners, clicked her mouse again. The recording had been deleted from the server. Julian had covered it, but Victoria wasn't stupid. She'd already copied it, and now she had it stored. With the subject line, "HR Breach, Camille Reyes." Her smile was polite. Her eyes were not. Back in the lounge, Camille finished her coffee and stood slowly, the bracelet catching a strip of sunlight from the window. Julian stood too. She held the empty cup in her hands like it might help her say what she couldn't before. "I meant it, you know," she said softly. "What I said in the recording." Julian's eyes didn't move. Then he asked again. Slower this time, like a promise, not a threat. "Do you mean it now?" And just before she could answer, Julian's phone buzzed. He looked down, his jaw clenched. Camille caught a glimpse of the screen. "Urgent. Internal leak. Audio file resurfaced." Julian stood frozen, phone still lit in his hand. Camille saw the change in his posture before she even read the screen. He was never the type to react quickly. His power came from stillness. But this time, his jaw tensed visibly. He turned the screen toward her without a word. "Urgent. Internal leak. Audio file resurfaced. Gossip page has it." Camille blinked. No, that can't be. I thought you deleted it." "I did," he said, calm but clipped. "From every internal server, but someone copied it." The words hung in the air like smoke. The kind that stings your eyes before you realize it's fire. Her hands went straight to the silver bracelet again, gripping it without thinking. "Was it someone in the room?" she asked. Julian didn't answer. He was already walking to his desk, unlocking a drawer. Camille followed, watching as he pulled out a folder. Not digital, not sleek, just old-school manila with a handwritten tab, "Internal Risk Watch List." He flipped pages until he stopped at a name, Victoria Lane. Camille's heart dropped. "Her?" she whispered. "But she's—" "My father's goddaughter," Julian finished, "and the unofficial watchdog for the Legacy Partners." She heard it. She was in the hallway when the recording was mentioned. That's all it would have taken. He closed the folder with a quiet snap. "Julian," she hesitated before daring to ask, "will this ruin me?" He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, "Not if I speak first." 20 minutes later, Camille sat in the rooftop garden above the building's executive wing. A quiet place few people ever used. Julian brought up a tray of tea and 2 paper bags from the bakery on the corner. "I thought we could use a breather," he said, "before the board starts calling." She blinked at him. "You carry trays now?" "I delegate important things. But cinnamon scones, non-negotiable. That's personal." Camille gave a breath of a laugh. "You remembered." "I listen." He handed her a napkin and sat down on the bench beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost brushed, but not quite. For a moment the world slowed. Leaves rustled in the planter boxes. A low breeze carried the scent of cinnamon and rosemary. It was too peaceful for a day like this. She unwrapped the scone, trying to speak lightly. "So, what happens now? Do I draft a formal apology to the board, or—" "You won't be saying a word," Julian said, sipping his tea. "I'll issue a statement myself. If anyone asks, the voice note was taken out of context and part of a private HR review, which technically is true. And the part about me being in love with you—" He raised an eyebrow. "You said it, not me." She laughed, a real one this time, surprised by her own ease with him. "But you're not mad?" she added, more serious now. He didn't answer right away, then, softly, "Camille, I've been called a lot of things in this building. Cold, unreachable, strategic to a fault. But no one has ever looked at me the way you did in that recording, like I was human." She blinked. "And that matters to you?" He didn't look at her when he answered, just down at his tea. "It matters more than I expected." Elsewhere, Victoria Lane was already drafting a press-friendly tip to a gossip blog. Nothing direct, just a few vague sentences. Sources say a junior analyst has been having private meetings with the CEO. She wears a bracelet that looks just like the one his late mother wore. Coincidence? Or is the Frost family hiding more than profits? She smiled to herself, hit send, and leaned back in her chair. Duh. Back on the rooftop, Camille finished her tea. The last drops were sweet with honey. "I should go," she said. "I still have 3 spreadsheets to review before 5. Julian took her cup and stood too. "I'll cover your department until this blows over. You need space." But as she stepped toward the elevator, he added, "Camille?" She turned. He reached into his coat pocket and held out something small. It was the matching bracelet. "Just until we know," he said. "About everything. About our mothers. About us." She took it with trembling hands. 2 bracelets, 1 truth waiting in between them. Then her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. It said, "You don't know who he really is. Ask him about Barcelona." Camille stared at the message on her phone. "You don't know who he really is. Ask him about Barcelona." The letters felt cold, personal, like someone had been watching her far too closely. She read it again, slower this time, then once more, just to be sure she wasn't imagining things. But the words didn't change, and she had no idea who sent them. She turned slightly, glancing back toward the rooftop, where Julian still stood clearing their teacups, the city stretching behind him like a painting, too calm for the chaos now swirling inside her. Should she ask him now? Would that be too confrontational? Or would waiting feel like dishonesty? She turned the screen off and slipped the phone into her pocket. Not yet, she whispered to herself. She needed answers, but not with her heart this loud in her chest. 2 hours later, Camille was back at her desk, surrounded by spreadsheets she couldn't focus on and a silence far too heavy to feel normal. People kept stealing glances. No one said a word, but she felt the shift in air, the cautious sympathy, the fake busyness. The office was pretending nothing happened. That was worse than gossip. Then her email chimed. Subject: urgent social monitoring alert from communications desk. Camille opened it instantly. The screenshot was clear. A bar behind the boardroom. Mysterious audio confession from inside Frost & Caldwell stirs internal chaos. Junior employee allegedly in love with the CEO and now wears a bracelet identical to his late mother's. Sources say a family scandal may be brewing. Office, romance, Frost scandal, Camila Reyes. They'd used her full name. Her breath caught. This was no longer private, no longer speculation. She wasn't just a whisper in the hallway now. She was a trending hashtag. Camille stood up without thinking and walked, not fast, but with the kind of quiet urgency that makes people get out of your way. Straight to Julian's office. She didn't knock. He looked up the moment she walked in, already holding a report. He had seen it. "I told them not to mention you," he said, before she even spoke. His tone was clipped but careful. "Legal's already working on a response." Camille held up her phone, voice trembling. "It's not just a post. They named me. They're dragging your mother's name and this bracelet, my mother's bracelet, like it's some prop in a soap opera." "I know. And now this." She shoved the mystery text in front of him. "Now I'm getting this." Julian read the message slowly. She watched the way his fingers gripped the edges of her phone, just slightly tighter. "Barcelona," she said. "What does it mean?" Silence. Only the faint tick of the desk clock filled the space. Julian set the phone down and walked around to the window. Hands in pockets, posture tall, voice lower than usual. "It's not something I talk about, not because I'm hiding it, because talking about it nearly ruined me once." Camille stayed still. Her heart raced, but she let him speak. "A few years before I took over Frost & Caldwell, I lived in Barcelona. I was there leading a private acquisition deal. I was younger, too confident, and engaged." He was 38 now, old enough to carry his past with clarity, and young enough for it to still matter. Camille felt her stomach twist. Her name was Eliza. She was magnetic, brilliant, the kind of woman who made every room feel like her stage. And for a while, I was part of her show. He walked back to the desk, eyes not on her, but distant, like replaying a film behind his eyes. She leaked a confidential term sheet to the press, hoping to force the board's hand and make me look like a hero in the public eye. When I found out, I ended it. But she wasn't done. Camille's voice came out softer than she expected. "What did she do?" She told the partners I gave her classified data, that I'd jeopardized the company for her. They launched an internal investigation. No proof. But in this world, even the smell of scandal sticks. He looked at Camille now, really looked. Barcelona became the place where I stopped trusting people. Camille's breath hitched, because she understood now. He wasn't cold. He was guarded. The wall around him wasn't arrogance. It was survival. "I'm not her," Camille said quietly. "I'm not here to destroy you." "I know." His voice cracked just slightly. "And I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't try to fall in." She caught herself. Her voice caught too. Julian stepped closer, his expression softer now. "I know you didn't." He placed a hand gently on the edge of her desk, the closest he'd ever stood to her outside of work. "But I also know this isn't fair to you." He reached into his coat and pulled out the second bracelet, the one from the photo frame. I meant what I said earlier. I want to find out the truth about this, about our mothers, about everything. But if it's too much, Camille..." Her name in his mouth made her knees weak. "You can walk away." She looked at the bracelet, then at him. Something deep and old passed between them, a recognition. Maybe, or the echo of something not yet fully understood. "I'm not walking," she said. That night, Camille took the long way home, passing through streets that had always felt familiar. But tonight they felt like a different city, one where shadows knew her name. She stopped at a quiet bakery and bought a chocolate tart. She didn't know why, just something warm, something to hold on to. When she got home, she lit a single candle. The soft scent of vanilla filled the room. On her small coffee table, she placed both bracelets side by side. Then, with shaking hands, she opened the old box her mother had left her. Inside were faded documents, photographs, and one thick envelope she had never dared to open. On the front, in her mother's handwriting, "For when you need answers." She opened it. Inside was a hospital certificate, birth of Camille Elise Reyes, mother Maria Celeste Ramos, father Julian Marcus Frost Sr. Born Barcelona, Spain, 1999. Camille felt the world tilt. Her knees buckled, and she sat slowly on the couch. Julian's father, not just his name, as her father. She wasn't in love with a stranger anymore. She was in love with a man whose family might be her own, and someone knew it. Her phone buzzed again. "Open your eyes, Camille. He's not the only Frost hiding something." Camille didn't move for a long time. The candle flickered gently beside her. The two silver bracelets lay untouched on the table, still quiet, unaware of the storm that now thundered inside her. She looked again at the hospital certificate. Julian Marcus Frost Sr., father, Camille Elise Reyes. Child. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense all at once. Her bracelet, his mother's, the shared softness in their hands, the way her own mother had always gone quiet whenever someone mentioned Barcelona. Camille's stomach turned, and she wrapped her arms around herself as if bracing for a wind that hadn't come yet. Julian. She had almost kissed him. She had confessed to loving him. What if this changed everything? What if it didn't? Her phone buzzed again, same unknown number. "You weren't supposed to find that." She stood immediately, curtains fluttering behind her from the cracked window. Her hands trembled as she locked the door, double-checked the windows, and pulled her robe tighter around her body. Who was watching her? How did they know what she had opened? She turned the lights off and sat in the dark, lit only by the candle. A part of her wanted to run. The other part, the part that still believed in dignity, in truth, in her mother's trembling smile, wanted answers. And there was only one man who might have them. The next morning, Julian Frost stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse bathroom, buttoning his shirt with slower fingers than usual. He hadn't slept, not because of the scandal that he could weather, but because Camille had left the rooftop with too many words unspoken. He could still see the way she looked at him when she said she wasn't walking away, that flicker in her eyes, that quiet kind of bravery that people missed if they weren't paying attention. He had never been in love with a woman like her, and now he wasn't sure if he had the right to be. Camille arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual. No makeup, no curled hair, just her usual cream blouse, soft gray pants, and a cardigan her mother had once knitted for her when she first got the job. She walked through the lobby without pausing, even though she felt every pair of eyes follow her. The receptionist, who usually offered a chipper "good morning," merely gave a hesitant nod. Camille nodded back, silent, composed. Inside, her heartbeat was out of rhythm. She walked past her desk and straight to the executive elevator. Pressed P for penthouse, for Julian. She had never ridden this elevator alone, not until today. He opened the door himself when she knocked. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly less perfect than usual. He looked like he hadn't slept either, But his expression changed the second he saw her. "Camille, I need to show you something," she said, stepping past him. She set the envelope on his desk and stood silently while he read the document. His face went still, then pale, then unreadable. He looked at the name, Julian Marcus Frost Sr. "My father," he said slowly. "Yes." He ran a hand through his hair. For the first time since she'd met him, Julian looked lost. "My mother never told me. She never said he had another child." "My mother never told me either," Camille said softly. "But she never let go of this." She held up the bracelet on her wrist. She called it a promise, a piece of a story I'd someday understand. Julian sat down. Camille sat too. "I don't know what this makes us," she whispered. He didn't answer. "I don't want it to be true," she admitted, voice cracking. He looked up sharply. "Why?" "Because I want to keep loving you." The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Julian closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was a weight there. Not shame, not horror, but grief. The kind you only carry when your past is rewritten without your consent. He reached into his pocket slowly and took out his phone. "There's something I keep replaying in my head," Julian said, his voice quieter than usual. Camille's breath caught. He looked at her. "That voice note, you said it was just for you, but now I can't stop thinking. Maybe it was for both of us." He held up the phone. "Do you want to hear it again together?" She hesitated, then nodded. He tapped the screen, and then her voice filled the room. "Okay, I know this is ridiculous. It's 2:17 in the morning, and I can't sleep. Again. I wasn't going to say this out loud, ever. But I need to get it out of my chest. I think I'm in love with him." Pause. "Not because he's the CEO or powerful or whatever people see when they look at him, but because I've seen the way he stays behind when no one's watching. The way he fixes people's work silently just so they won't be embarrassed in meetings. The way he thanked me last week, like it actually meant something he probably doesn't even remember. But I do. And every time I try to forget, it gets worse." Soft laugh. "Anyway, I just needed to say it, even if it's just to this little voice note. I'd never tell him, or anyone, ever. This is just for me. Delete it in the morning, Camille." When the recording ended, neither of them moved. The candle flickered between them. "You meant it," Julian said, not as a question, but as a truth. Camille nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect anyone to hear it." "But yes, I meant every word." He looked at her bracelet, then at her. "That version of you, the one who whispered in the dark. She's the bravest person I've ever heard." Camille let out the smallest unsteady breath, and for a moment, just one. It didn't matter who they were, only what they were to each other. "DNA test?" she said. He nodded slowly. "Yes." They sat for a long moment, just breathing in the truth neither of them could fix with words. Then Julian stood and went into the kitchen. He returned a few moments later with 2 mugs of tea and a plate of buttered toast. "I'm sorry," he said, setting them down. "This is all I could manage this morning." Camille laughed gently, her voice still shaky. "Butter and honesty. That's more than I've had in days." They sat side by side on the couch, not touching, not flirting, just being. 2 people in a moment too big for labels, sharing silence and toast. For a flicker of time, it felt almost safe again. But across the city, Victoria Lane had received a text of her own, from the same anonymous number. "They're closer than they think, and it's going to destroy both of them." Victoria smiled, then sent a file to a journalist friend with the subject line, "Exclusive. Illegitimate heir threatens Frost legacy." Back in the penthouse, Camille was just about to leave when Julian said quietly, "There's something I haven't told you." She turned. "What?" He hesitated, a rare crack in his usual confidence. Barcelona wasn't just a deal gone wrong. That's where I first met your mother." Camille's heart stopped. Julian stepped forward. "I don't know if she ever realized who I was. I was there on business. She worked in the hotel we stayed at. Discreet, kind. I helped her when she fainted one day from exhaustion. We spoke. Twice. I never forgot her." Camille blinked. "Wait, you met her? She had your eyes." "She had—" "I didn't understand it then." She gripped the bracelet tightly. "And now—" He looked at her, pain and awe written across his face. "Now I think I met the woman who kept my sister hidden from a world that didn't deserve her." Camille's breath caught. Sister. Then came the knock. Sharp, cold. Official. Julian opened the door. A courier stood with a thick white envelope, eyes avoiding his. "For Mr. Julian Frost. Confidential." Julian opened it. Inside, a printed article. "Exclusive. Illegitimate daughter of Julian Frost Sr. discovered. Rumors of inheritance disputes and office affair, Rock, Frost, and Caldwell." Beneath the headline was Camille's name and her photo. Camille had never seen her face printed under a headline before. It was surreal, the kind of thing that only happened to politicians, movie stars, or women in messy divorces. Never to quiet analysts who drank too much tea and hid their thoughts in voice notes, never meant to be heard. But there it was, her name, her photo, her bracelet, splashed across a digital article already spreading like wildfire. And below the fold, a line that stole the breath from her lungs. "Unnamed source confirms DNA connection to Julian Frost Sr. Opening questions about inheritance and company succession." Julian closed the folder that held the article and looked at her. "Don't read the comments," he said quietly. She nodded, but she already had. 30 minutes later, she stood outside the boardroom, not her usual workspace, not a conference she was invited to. But this time, her presence wasn't optional. "Miss Reyes," said the assistant, holding the door, "the board is ready for you." "Ready to see her?" "Yes," but not necessarily ready to hear her. Camille stepped inside, 12 seats around a polished mahogany table, 11 occupied by powerful men and women in expensive suits. And at the far end, standing and silent, Julian. He wasn't seated. That was deliberate. He wasn't going to let them interrogate her alone. Camille stood beside him, her bracelet cold against her wrist. Her hands gripped the envelope she'd brought, not the article, but the DNA request form, signed, submitted, still pending. "Miss Reyes," began a sharp voice near the center, "Mr. Hallstrom, the senior partner who'd worked alongside Julian's father for decades." His tone was brittle, clipped. "We find ourselves in an uncomfortable situation." She didn't speak. Julian did. "You mean a personal matter leaked without her consent?" The man didn't flinch. "The public doesn't separate personal from corporate when your name is in the headlines." Camille inhaled slowly. "I didn't leak anything." "No one's accusing you," a woman across the table added, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But this has implications. Legal, financial, reputational," Julian cut in. "What exactly is being questioned here? Whether she's related to my father? Whether I showed favoritism?" "She was promoted twice in less than 18 months, Hallstrom said flatly. Camille stepped forward then, gently but firmly. Her voice was soft but clear. "Because I worked for it." Julian looked over at her. There was pride in his eyes. "I stayed late. I cleaned up numbers that were 6 months overdue. I trained 2 interns who didn't know what a pivot table was. And I never once used a family name because I didn't even know I had one." The room went still. Camille reached into her bag and placed the bracelets on the table, her mother's. His mother's, side by side. "I didn't ask for this story," she said, "but it found me. I'm not trying to make a claim. I'm just trying to live with the truth." Julian stepped beside her. Unless someone here wants to admit they leaked private HR records and personal photographs, I suggest we end this conversation now and redirect our attention to the quarter's earnings, which she helped save. There was a pause. Then Mr. Hallstrom cleared his throat. We'll review legal implications separately. For now, I suppose we're done here. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat. Julian placed one hand gently on her back as they walked out. You didn't flinch, he said softly. Camille exhaled for the first time in hours. I almost did when that one woman called me dear. Julian gave the faintest smile. Patronizing, classic move. They stepped into his office just as his assistant arrived with 2 cappuccinos and a paper bag. I figured you skipped breakfast, she said. Camille opened the bag, croissants still warm. She broke one in half, handed it to Julian, and took a bite, even though her stomach was still twisted. Small things still mattered. Warm bread, coffee. The fact that he didn't leave her alone in that room. Julian leaned against his desk, watching her quietly. You know, he said after a moment, my father never acknowledged his mistakes, not once. Not with me, not with anyone. Camille looked up. I don't want to be like him, Julian continued. I don't want to hide behind silence. She blinked slowly, the words catching her off guard. I didn't ask you to carry this, she said. I know. But I will. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was something fragile in the air, a closeness made sharper by the fact that neither of them knew what the DNA test would say, or what they'd do if the worst-case scenario turned out to be true. Then Camille's phone buzzed, unknown number again. You stood in front of them like you belong, but you don't. He's protecting you now. Let's see what happens when the truth finally comes. Julian noticed the change in her expression. Same number? She nodded. He took the phone gently from her hand, read the message, and said, We're tracing this. Today. Later that afternoon, Camille returned to her apartment to find a letter slipped under her door. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper with her name in perfect cursive. She opened it. You should have stayed quiet. Family secrets rot when they're exposed to light. Ask your mother what happened in room 214 of the Mirador Hotel. She'll know. And so will he. She froze. Room 214. That was the hotel her mother worked at, the hotel in Barcelona, the one where Julian said he met her. And now, someone wanted her to dig deeper. The paper trembled in Camille's hands. Ask your mother what happened in room 214 of the Mirador Hotel. She'll know. And so will he. There was no signature, no indication of who had written it, but the message was clear. Someone wanted to drag the truth out, not gently, not respectfully, but with force, with threat. Camille stared at the words for another minute, her breath shallow. Room 214, the Mirador Hotel, Barcelona. Her mother had always avoided talking about her time there. It was temporary, she used to say, folding laundry or rinsing rice in the kitchen sink. We don't need to remember everything that happened, but some things didn't stay buried. And now Camille needed answers that only one person could give. 1 hour later, she stood in the warm, tidy kitchen of her childhood home, a quiet bungalow at the edge of town where the walls smelled faintly of cinnamon and old wood. Her mother, Maria Celeste, moved around the stove with the same gentle grace Camille remembered from childhood. Her back was more hunched now, her hands more careful, but her eyes, still warm, still watching, met Camille's with quiet tension. I made your favorite, she said, pouring hot water into 2 cups, chamomile and a splash of honey. Camille nodded, voice too tight to speak. She sat down slowly at the little round table, where a faded embroidered cloth stretched beneath a tray of sweet biscuits. The same table where her mother once braided her hair before school, the same one where they had once whispered dreams and fears between sips of late-night tea. And now, a different kind of truth was waiting. Camille waited until her mother had sat down. Her hands folded carefully in her lap. "I need to ask you something," Camille said softly, "and I don't want you to be afraid." Her mother's smile faltered just for a moment. "I got a message about Barcelona." Maria froze. Camille continued gently. "It said to ask you what happened in room 214 of the Mirador Hotel." The silence that followed was so complete. Camille could hear the kettle cooling. Her mother looked down. "Why now?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Because I'm getting messages. Someone knows. And I found something." Camille reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope, the one with the hospital document, the name of her father. Julian Marcus Frost, Sr. Her mother flinched. "Is it true?" Camille asked, her voice trembling. "Was he really—" Her mother's eyes welled with tears. Slowly she reached for her tea, hand shaking just slightly. She took one long sip before speaking. "Yes." Camille felt something collapse in her chest. Not a scream, not an anger, just a sigh. A soft, sad surrender to a truth long overdue. "I was young," her mother said. "New to the hotel. You know how hard it was, working double shifts, barely speaking the language. Your abuela had passed and I didn't have anyone else. Not really." Camille nodded silently. "He stayed there for 2 months, business, meetings, always alone. I thought he was cold at first. But then, one night there was a mix-up with his reservation. The system double-booked his suite. I was sent to apologize." She paused. "He invited me for tea, in room 214. It was raining. I remember because my shoes were soaked, and I left footprints on the floor." Camille saw it, the memory forming in her mother's voice like a photograph developing slowly. "He was kind to me, Camille. Not powerful, not threatening, just kind. And very sad. I didn't know who he was, not really, just a man who listened to me speak about home." She reached across the table and touched Camille's hand. "I didn't expect anything. I didn't even know I was pregnant until after he left." Camille swallowed. "Why didn't you ever tell him?" Maria Celeste hesitated. Her face hardened just slightly. "I wrote him a letter. I tried. But it came back, unopened, marked refused. I thought maybe he didn't want to know. Or maybe someone else made sure he never would." Camille's voice cracked. "So you raised me alone? All this time? Carrying it?" Her mother smiled sadly. "You were never a burden." "I didn't mean it like that. I know." They sat in silence, the tea cooling in their cups. Camille finally reached for a biscuit, more out of instinct than hunger. "Do you remember when I tried to flush a sock down the toilet because I thought it had a spider on it?" Her mother laughed, a soft, grateful sound. "You clogged the whole bathroom for 3 days and swore you saw it wave at you." They both laughed, and for a second, the heaviness lifted. Then Camille took her bracelet off and placed it between them. "I think his son is in love with me." Her mother blinked slowly. "Julian?" "Yes." "Does he know you might be—" "His sister. We're waiting on results." Her mother's face twisted with emotion. I know how it sounds. But I didn't know. Neither of us did. And now we're in the middle of something we didn't choose." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "You've always followed your heart, with more grace than I ever could. Whatever happens, promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't let someone else's shame write your ending." Camille blinked. "Do you think he's ashamed?" Her mother looked at her, and with quiet certainty said, "I think he's terrified, just like you." As Camille walked home that night, the sun dipping behind the skyline, she checked her phone again. One new message, unknown number. "You want to talk about room 214? You should ask who was waiting in the hallway when your mother came out." "You want to talk about room 214? You should ask who was waiting in the hallway when your mother came out." Camille stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. The city pulsed around her, cars passing, voices rising and falling, but inside Everything went still. Her mother hadn't mentioned anyone else. No hallway. No witness. Just rain. Tea. Kindness. So who had been there? And why did it matter now? Camille reached for the silver bracelet on her wrist. Her fingers curled around it the way they always did, when her heart didn't know where to land. She needed to talk to Julian, not later, now. He opened the door in socks. No tie, no suit jacket, and, to Camille's quiet surprise, slightly burnt toast in one hand. "I can explain," he said, lifting the toast like a flag of surrender. "You cook?" she teased gently. "Only when I'm anxious. I just don't eat it afterward." She stepped inside. "I got another message," she said. "About room 214. He set the toast down, serious now. "What did it say?" Camille pulled up the message and handed him the phone. Julian read it once, then again, slower. His eyes darkened, not in anger, but in something quieter, recognition. "I was there," he said. Camille froze. "What?" "I didn't know, not until now. But I was in that hallway. I didn't know your mother's name. I didn't even know she'd been with my father." He walked to the window, exhaling. "I had flown in for 2 days, a quick trip to review expansion plans. I arrived late. My father hadn't expected me, but when I got off the elevator that night, I saw him. At the end of the hallway. I was only 19 back then, too young to understand the weight of what I was seeing and too used to following my father on last-minute business trips." He paused. "With a young woman." Camille's heart pounded. "I didn't hear anything," Julian added. "Just the look on her face as she left." She looked shaken, but not afraid, just changed. Camille said nothing. "She passed me," he continued, "and she apologized, even though she hadn't touched me. Then she hurried down the hall. I never forgot her face." Camille swallowed. "She was wearing black. She said her shoes were soaked." Julian nodded. Slowly. "Yes." "She was 19, Camille whispered, "alone in a foreign country, carrying a secret that changed both of our lives." "I had no idea," he said again, his voice thick. "None," she nodded. "I believe you." They sat at the breakfast bar in his apartment, 2 plates between them, one with scorched toast, the other with scrambled eggs and a sliced avocado Julian confessed had taken him 10 minutes to cut because he was emotionally negotiating with the pit. Camille laughed, not loudly, but it was real. "You're not what people expect," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You mean the cold, untouchable CEO reputation is exaggerated?" She smiled. Wildly. A quiet beat passed. He set his coffee down. "Camille, I know this is asking too much, but I need you to tell me something." She looked up. "If the DNA test says we share a father, what happens to us?" The question hung between them. Camille felt it, the weight of their connection, the impossible ache of everything they'd built in silence. In shared coffees and soft glances and long nights working side by side. "I don't know," she said truthfully, "but I know this wasn't our fault. We didn't choose our families." Julian leaned forward slightly. "I chose to protect you, and I'd do it again." That stirred something deep inside her. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up, read the screen, and went still. "What is it?" Camille asked. He held the screen out to her. "An email. Subject, DNA results. Confidential." Camille's breath caught. Her fingers hesitated before taking the phone. He didn't pressure her. "You open it," she whispered. I'm not ready." Julian nodded once. He tapped. His eyes scanned. Then slowly, he sat back. Camille couldn't read his face. Not fully. Her voice cracked. "Julian?" He handed her the phone. At the top of the report, relationship probability, Mointweiser operant, no biological relationship established between Camille Elise Reyes and Julian Marcus Frost. Camille's eyes filled instantly, not with relief, not with joy, but something quieter, more overwhelming. Not his sister, not related. Still, them. She looked up. He was watching her with the kind of silence that said everything louder than words. "I don't know what that means for us," she whispered. "I do," he said. And then gently, he reached for her hand. But before their fingers met, Camille's phone rang. Unknown number, again. She picked up. This time, a voice answered. Female. Cold. "You think the past is done just because a test says otherwise?" Camille's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "I'm the person who made sure the test got to you before the board did." "What do you want?" "I want to finish what your mother never had the courage to." The line went dead. Camille looked up at Julian. Her hands trembled. "She's here," she whispered. "Who?" "The woman who's been watching. The one who knew everything. She's not just leaking information. Julian," he stepped closer, "she's trying to destroy your family, one truth at a time." She had access to the internal servers through her role on the Crisis Communications Committee, enough access to intercept the DNA report before anyone else saw it. "The voice still echoed in Camille's ear even after the call ended. "I'm the person who made sure the test got to you before the board did. I want to finish what your mother never had the courage to." Julian stared at her, his jaw tense. "Did she say a name?" Camille shook her head. "Just threats. Half-truths." "She said she got the results to you before the board," he repeated, frowning. "That means she had access," Camille whispered, "to our personal emails, to the lab's report. She's close. Too close." Julian pulled his laptop over. "Let me call in my tech team. They'll trace the call." Camille touched his hand. "Just briefly." "Wait." He looked up. "I need a minute," she said. Not from him, but from this. From the storm, the secrets, the spiraling shadows of her mother's past. She stood, walked to the tall window behind his desk, and stared out over the city. Lights sparkled far below, but the sky above was darkening. After a long silence, she turned back to him. "Can I stay for dinner?" Julian didn't hesitate. Yes. An hour later, they stood in his kitchen, both barefoot, both quiet, both trying to pretend this was a normal evening. Julian drained a pot of pasta while Camille stirred sauce in a pan. The simplicity of the act, the sound of simmering garlic, the steam rising from boiling water, was oddly grounding. "You're good at this," Camille said. He looked over. "That's because I used to be terrible?" She smiled. "How terrible?" "I once tried to impress someone in college by making risotto. Forgot the broth, burnt the pan. We ended up eating cereal on the floor." Camille laughed, the kind of laugh that softened her shoulders. "Sounds romantic, actually." He looked at her for a moment. "It wasn't, but this is." She looked up, startled by his honesty. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. He meant it. Dinner was served on simple white plates at his kitchen island. No wine, just water. No candles, just warm light from under the cabinets. It felt real. They ate slowly, their conversation light at first. Favorite films, worst first jobs, the tragic truth that Julian didn't know how to ride a bike. "I grew up around chauffeurs and schedules," he said, wincing. "Somehow, I missed the moment where other kids were falling off sidewalks." Camille giggled. "You're telling me I could beat you in a race?" "In every way imaginable." They both laughed, and for a moment, just one, it all faded. The voice, the gossip, the shadow of room 214. After dinner, Camille stood and walked toward the couch. But something tugged at her. She reached down and unclasped her bracelet, the one her mother had given her. She held it for a long second, then gently placed it on Julian's coffee table. "I need to know who I am without it," she said softly. Julian stepped beside her. "You are who you've always been, Camille. Brave, kind, smarter than all of them combined." She turned to face him. He was close now. So close. So. "I almost told you I loved you that night in your office," she whispered. Julian's voice dropped. "I almost kissed you after the board meeting." Her breath caught. "I didn't," she said. Because I didn't want it to be a mistake. I didn't, he replied, because I didn't want it to be too soon. They stood like that for a moment, not touching, but decidedly not apart. Then Camille stepped forward, just enough to make the choice hers. And when Julian leaned in, slowly, gently, as if asking permission with every breath, she met him halfway. Their kiss wasn't urgent. It wasn't wild. It was the kind of kiss people remember at the end of stories. Soft, real, earned. Later, they sat curled up together on the couch. The news played on mute in the background. Camille rested her head on his chest, eyes closed, until Julian suddenly sat forward. Wait, he grabbed the remote, unmuted the TV, on screen a news anchor. With breaking developments in the Frost family controversy. While official statements remain scarce, a new witness has come forward claiming to have direct knowledge of Julian Frost Sr.'s affairs. Camille sat upright. The camera cut to a blurred image, then a voice. I worked at the Mirador Hotel, the voice said. I remember Maria Celeste, and I remember the woman who intercepted her letter to Mr. Frost. She wore red lipstick, pearls, and called herself the future of the Frost family. Camille's mouth fell open. Julian's face went pale. She's not talking about my mother, he said. Camille whispered, she's talking about Victoria. The news clip replayed again, pixelated, looped, a voice from the past crawling into the present. She wore red lipstick, pearls, and called herself the future of the Frost family. Julian stood frozen, eyes locked on the muted television. Camille watched the tight line of his jaw harden, not in confusion this time, but in understanding. Victoria, he said under his breath. She was there, Camille whispered. Back then, she saw my mother. She intercepted the letter. She didn't just bury it, Julian added slowly. She buried you. Camille sat down, her legs suddenly heavy. Her bracelet, her mother's, glinted quietly on the coffee table. She hadn't worn it all day. She hadn't wanted to feel it, but now it called to her like a memory, demanding to be remembered. She looked at Julian. She's been watching me this whole time. And me, he said, waiting for a moment like this, for the two of us to cross some invisible line so she could control the fallout. Control it? Camille's voice cracked. She created it. Julian turned to her slowly, with a look that wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was grief, pressed down so long it had turned into something sharper. She used to work directly with my father. Even when I was a teenager, she was already positioning herself in rooms where real power was exchanged. I always thought she was ambitious, loyal even. But now she's dangerous, Camille said quietly. Julian nodded. We go to the board, he said. We show them what she's done. Tampering, privacy violations, false narratives. And if she sent those messages, she did, Camille said with certainty. No one else would know the details she knew, not unless they'd been there. In room 214. Julian took a step closer. She tried to erase you. But you're still here, and I... He paused, his voice softened. I see you, Camille. I see everything now. She met his eyes, and for a second the ache inside her cracked wide open. She picked up the bracelet and fastened it around her wrist again, this time not to remember her mother, but to remember herself. Later that night, they sat on the kitchen floor like two sleepover kids in grown-up clothes. Camille rested her back against a cabinet, while Julian battled a stubborn microwave with a bag of popcorn. Is it supposed to puff like that? She asked, raising an eyebrow. No idea, he said. I burned toast this morning, remember? A few seconds later, a pop. Then a faint whiff of scorched butter. He pulled it out, poured the salvageable bits into a bowl, and sat beside her. Their shoulders brushed. Neither moved away. You know what scares me, she said quietly after a few minutes. Julian looked over. That this won't be enough. That we'll have the truth, the evidence, the letters, and somehow it still won't matter. Because she's richer, louder, more connected. It will matter, he said. How can you be sure? Because I'm not connected to her anymore. I'm connected to you, and that's what terrifies her most. Camille blinked, then laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he said it so plainly. Do you ever stop being dramatic? Julian gave a crooked grin. Only when I sleep. Which hasn't happened in 3 days. She leaned her head back. I just want it to be over. Not even for me, for my mother. She's carried this silence for half her life. Julian's voice dropped. Then let's end it right. They were still sitting on the floor when her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. You want to expose her? Go ahead. But be ready for what she kept hidden about your father. Room 214 wasn't the whole story. Check the envelope under the carpet in Suite 2B. The truth cuts both ways. Camille sat up straighter, eyes widening. Julian read the message over her shoulder, then stood, already reaching for his coat. I know that room. You've been there? Years ago. My father used to request it every visit. It wasn't the fancy suite. It was discreet, private. Camille's voice dropped. Do you think the letter, the one my mother said she wrote, is it possible he did read it? Julian hesitated. There's one way to find out. They booked the first red-eye flight available. Neither of them slept on the plane. Not even for a minute. The cabin lights dimmed, the engines hummed, and the silence between them felt heavier than the altitude. By the time they landed, the city was still half asleep, caught between night and dawn. Just past midnight, they stood in front of the Mirador Hotel in Barcelona. Camille had never been inside, not in memory at least. She'd only seen the photos her mother once tucked in a shoebox at the back of her closet. But being here now, in the dim light, in the scent of polished wood and citrus cleaner, felt like stepping through the pages of a life never lived. Julian showed his ID. The concierge, either too tired or too impressed to ask questions, led them to Suite 2B and left without a word. Inside, the room was clean, simple, timeless. Camille let the silence speak. She walked slowly to the far corner of the rug, knelt, lifted it, and there, pressed under the floorboard, taped with care. A yellowing envelope. Julian helped her slide it free. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, a single letter, handwritten, and one photograph. Julian read aloud. To whoever finds this, I loved her, but I couldn't protect her. They said she would ruin me. They said no one could ever know. But I wanted her to know. I would have chosen her if the world had let me. Tell our daughter I wanted her. Tell her I wasn't strong enough. But I never stopped hoping I'd be forgiven. Julian Marcus Frost Sr. Camille's lips trembled. I wasn't a mistake, she whispered. I was loved. Julian gently placed his hand on hers. You are loved. She pulled out the photo next, faded, soft at the corners. Her mother, younger, laughing, and next to her, him. Julian's father, not stern, not polished, just human, hand on her shoulder. Eyes on her, they looked happy. Camille wiped her eyes and stood, but then a click, not from them, from the door. They turned. There, in the doorway, framed by the dim hallway light, Victoria, red lipstick, a single pearl earring, phone raised, recording. She didn't look furious, she looked satisfied. I told you, she said. The truth cuts both ways. Then she stepped forward and dropped something onto the floor. Another letter, every message, every anonymous warning, every so-called witness, they all traced back to her. Victoria had been pulling every string from the beginning, stamped with Julian's father's name. I think you'll want to read this one before you start playing hero, she said, then turned and walked away. The envelope sat between them like a ghost. Victoria's last move dropped on the carpet with precision and a smile that said, I still have power. Camille stared at it for a long moment. Julian didn't speak. He waited. Carefully, Camille peeled it open. One letter. No photograph this time. Just the thick ink of a man trying to explain himself. To the board, in case I am no longer able to speak for myself, should any claims arise of an illegitimate daughter, know this. I took measures to ensure that such rumors would not tarnish the Frost name or the company's reputation. Should someone claim to be my blood, they do so without my consent or blessing. Any such claim must be treated as false, regardless of DNA. Julian read it twice. Camille didn't cry. She folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and set it aside. He must have written it under pressure from the board, out of fear, not lack of love. He wrote 2 truths, she said finally, one from his heart and one from his fear. Julian's voice was low. He left you love in a drawer and shame in a file. He never received your mother's letter. Victoria intercepted it before it reached him. Camille nodded, and Victoria knew. All along. She held on to this, he added, waiting to decide who would win. She thought it gave her leverage. It doesn't, Camille said, not anymore. She pulled the photo from the earlier envelope, the one with her mother and Julian's father. Quiet, beautiful, real. I don't need his blessing to know who I am. Julian stepped forward. And I don't need the Frost name to know who you are. They stood in that quiet room, history folded around them, no more lies between them. And for the first time in Camille's life, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt finished. 3 days later, the boardroom was packed. Every partner, every executive. HR, legal, press reps. Victoria Lane sat at the long table, pearl earrings polished, lips painted red, calm, until Julian walked in with Camille beside him, not behind, beside. She wore pale blue, her mother's bracelet glinting softly on her wrist. She didn't shrink. Julian spoke first. I've called this meeting to address the rumors, the leaked documents, and the attempt to rewrite history for personal gain. He looked directly at Victoria. We have proof, he continued, of intercepted mail, of false statements, of internal manipulation of HR records and leaked lab results. Victoria didn't move. Do you have a confession? No, Camille said softly. We have something better. She stepped forward and placed both letters on the table, her father's handwritten note from Suite 2B and the board letter from Victoria's envelope. This is who he was, she said. Both truths at once. The man who loved me and the man too afraid to say it out loud, Julian added. And the woman who kept them apart, not to protect him, but to protect herself. A pause, a long one. Then someone at the table cleared their throat. I move to open an internal investigation into the actions of Ms. Lane. Victoria stood. On what grounds? On the grounds that truth, Camille said, deserves a place in this company and in this family. No one stopped her. 2 weeks later, Victoria resigned quietly. No press release, no denial. Just an empty office and a reputation too stained to defend. The board, privately and unanimously, issued Camille a formal apology, not for the scandal. But for the years, she was kept in the dark. They called her presence an honor to the Frost name. Camille didn't correct them. She didn't need to anymore. 1 month later, on a Sunday afternoon, Camille and Julian hosted a small lunch in the garden behind her childhood home. Just family, friends. Tea, sunshine. Her mother stood beside Julian as he helped set the table, teasing him gently when he knocked over a pitcher of lemonade. Camille watched them, the two people who carried her in separate ways, finally smiling in the same frame. She wore the bracelet again, not because she needed to hold on to her past, but because she could finally wear it without pain. At the end of the meal, Julian stood and tapped his glass gently. Everyone turned. His voice, always calm, always sure, now carried something softer. I don't make speeches, he said, but I do know when something is worth saying. He looked at Camille. She changed my life. She reminded me what honesty sounds like, what courage looks like. He turned toward her fully now, pulling something from his pocket. Not a ring, but the second bracelet, the matching one, once worn by his mother, polished, whole, waiting. He stepped toward Camille and knelt, gently taking her hand. "I don't have a script for this," he said, "but I know what I feel." He held up the bracelet. "This wasn't just my mother's. It's for the woman I want to build a life with. No more secrets, no more almosts. Just yes. Every morning we wake up and every night we go to sleep." Camille's eyes shimmered. "I'm not asking you to marry me right this second," he added. "I'm asking if you'll choose me from now on." She smiled, tears falling freely now. "I already did. The night I thought I'd lost you." Julian fastened the bracelet on her wrist, and in front of everyone, he pulled her into an embrace that wasn't a kiss for show. It was a quiet vow. Behind them, her mother whispered again, "Ay, Dios mío, finalmente." That night, Camille and Julian sat together on the porch swing. No noise, no press, no secrets. Just them. She held the photograph in one hand and the bracelet in the other. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if I hadn't sent that voice note?" He smiled, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "Then I never would have heard the most honest thing anyone's ever said about me." She leaned into him, the quiet wrapping around them like a blanket. "I never meant for anyone to hear it," she whispered. "I was always meant to," he answered. "The end. Some truths take time." Some love stories begin with mistakes, but when someone hears your heart and stays, that's the kind of story that never ends. Did this ending warm your heart? Let us know in the comments. Rate this story from 2 to 10, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. See you in the next story.